Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Moody Abdul, who is a marketing strategy tech lead at LinkedIn. Moody, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot about your career journey and, the things, the goods and the bads and the incline. But before we actually get into that, Moody, I want the listeners to know a little bit more about your backstory. Could you tell us a little bit about your cultural background and where you're from?
Yes, so my family is from Lebanon. They basically ran away during the Civil War, so they were refugees, landed in Canada. One of them landed in Vancouver, one of them in Montreal. And so I was born in Vancouver to
Mhm.
a family of Lebanese folks. So I would guess I would call myself Lebanese, Canadian Lebanese. I'm still trying to figure that out.
And how was the your childhood growing up? Coming from being Lebanese and living in Canada.
Well, um, the childhood was a mixture of awful and awfully good. I think the memories that were made as a child that I can reflect on, first of all, you know, I didn't learn English till I was like 5 years old. So I was ESL. My family
Mhm.
spoke Arabic to me as a kid. So when I got to speaking with all the other kids in the park or wherever, the kindergarten class, it was very new to me. And so it was a little bit of a struggle. I always struggled with English growing up. And I would say, around 5, 6 is when my parents divorced. And I grew up with just my dad. So he was a single dad raising us in Vancouver. My mom had moved to Toronto. So we struggled bad, man. It was welfare, food stamps, basically poverty for 6, 7 years from then before we got a handle on like a routine. But pretty much my entire life was rough up until college, really.
Mhm, mhm. And just for the listeners so that are joining in, could you talk a little bit more about like the Lebanese culture?
Oh yeah, you know what? It's actually one of the things that took me a long time was figuring out this dual identity because in the Lebanese culture, especially being raised by a single dad who is Lebanese, I I didn't really have a role model of how I should behave and act in a Canadian society. So I was constantly picking up on that from my friends, from their parents, but everybody around me was also this bicultural soup. So we were all trying to figure it out. And one of the things that was really a challenge is Lebanese men, very traditional. I mean, at least in my dad's generation, traditional, emotionless, uh, don't cry, that's bad. And, being in a Canadian culture where nowadays, at least, people are very open about that, very encouraging about that. There was a lot of things that I had to decide for myself. Do I want to be the Lebanese part of me, or do I want to adopt the Canadian culture in this moment? And
Mhm.
slowly, I would say that I adopted more of a Canadian culture when I reflect back on my life now, but there's still that Lebanese. There's always those like moments.
Mhm, mhm. And when you're talking about that culture and stuff, like, could you talk more like when you got here? I mean, when you're here in America, like, did you feel like your family members and friends were? Did you feel like you were a part of a community of Lebanese growing up in Canada? I know
It,
Canada is very diverse. You said
Mhm.
Vancouver, but did you feel like you were able to connect more with your culture outside of your house?
Yeah, so we did. I grew up in a Muslim family, so we would go to the mosque, the community center mosque on the. I actually went to the private school there for a couple of years, and it was mostly Lebanese people. So yes, I did interact with them. But around 12 years old, I think is when I stopped going to that community and stopped interacting with that community. And from then on, it was actually very rare for me to run into a Lebanese person. So whenever I would, meet somebody who's Lebanese or adjacent, around that Middle Eastern vibe, that culture, I was always like, oh, wow, like, hey, wasn't until I moved to Toronto where you start to meet a lot more Lebanese and Middle Eastern people that I realized there's all flavors of that. But when I grew up in such a bubble that I didn't even know what Lebanese was. I just
Mm,
saw that like one flavor of it.
mhm, mhm. Now, what were some of like the struggles that you faced as in your childhood?
Man, I remember pretty much money was the biggest one. My dad, for a few years was on welfare. So we were just paying rent and we'd have to go to the food bank to get whatever we could. Uh, Once he got his job, he wasn't educated in this country, so he had to take whatever job he could, and he was working, forklift driver in a factory, basically minimum wage. So almost my entire life was, how do I get $1 so I can buy like a slice of pizza to hang out with my friends, or how can I make enough money to pay for a phone because my dad was definitely not doing that when he
Mhm,
was trying to keep food on the table and lights on. So the struggles, first and foremost, were financial, but secondary, I was getting in a lot of trouble, man.
mm,
I was a kid, misunderstood kid, misdiagnosed, or I should say undiagnosed, uh, just causing trouble with all my teachers and all my classes. As a kid, I had pretty severe ADHD, and with a dad who didn't understand that, didn't know how to deal with it, that basically led to, the traditional ways of dealing with a troublemaker. Whip out the belt, whip out the whip out the wooden spoon,
oh,
uh,
yeah. Take it
go
back.
to the wall. Yeah, yeah. So that didn't work. And but luckily for me, I think what did work was I saw there were rare teachers, man, and I love these people to death. They really saw me for who I could be, and they gave me that respect and that like patience that I needed as a kid, and I gave it back to them tenfold. And
Mhm,
I went back after school many times to interact with them and really thank them. But I find that the first struggle I had was financial, and the second one was this cultural behavior. Like I didn't really have. I felt like I was raising myself for most of my life.
mhm. Okay. And what was like some of the aspirations as you were doing as a child when you're growing up? I know obviously financially kind of like might, prohibit you from like thinking of like you could actually be this or take this course to be here. But like what were some of your aspirations?
Man, I remember I would almost fail every class, and some classes I did fail. And so for a long time, I thought I was stupid. Like all the signals were pointing, I'm dumb. I'm getting bad grades, I'm getting in trouble. So there were moments where, like, I think when I was younger, when I was a kid, I got really attached to this idea of being an actor because I loved watching movies and TV shows. And it just felt so cool that you could escape your reality into this reality that you could be whatever you wanted. And then you'd step out and do something else and be a different reality. And so I started to get good at that. I enrolled in those classes. And then eventually I kind of saw, oh, you know what? Maybe I can make it big being in the music scene.
Hmm.
So I bought a little blue Yeti microphone and started rapping and singing in high school. And that
Let's get it. Let's get you.
and
I'm assuming you had a demo at that point in time.
oh, that is all private on YouTube. No person will see that in my life. But
Okay.
the
Well,
people
hold on. We need
the
to know,
people.
what was the rap name? What was the rap name?
Oh no, I can't give away myself like that, man. Maybe
Oh,
later I will share that.
okay, okay. All right, all right. I'll let you slide on that one.
So
Let you
so
slide.
the
Go on.
here's the other thing is because I was without a North Star, like I didn't really have somebody guiding me. My dad, you know, bless him, he did so much for us. And I don't want to confuse the listeners. Like as much as I suffered, like that man suffered a lot more, right? This guy was raising us, me and my brother, as a single dad for so many years in a country he did not know the culture, barely spoke the language. So I think it was hard for all of us. And one of the things that I feel I was lacking was somebody that could guide me in this culture. I didn't have anybody who's like, here's how you do it in Canada. Here's how you do it in the US. It's kind of similar cultures. Here's how you do it in this side of the world when you have all this baggage, when you have all these different cultures. Because, I couldn't really just listen to the people who grew up there and their families were there for hundreds of years because they were living a different reality than I was, right? They would
Mhm,
they would offer advice and things that you could do that were not actually feasible for me to do at that time. So I would latch on to whatever I could that I felt would help me escape my situation, that would help me
mhm,
escape this identity crisis, this poverty that I was facing. So there were moments that I went through, like I wanted to be a cop. No, no, no. I want to be a lawyer. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'll be an RMT. Oh, what about a pilot? So I was very like confused as a young like teenager, and really that changed later when I was 19.
mhm. Now, with this going on, like, explain to the listeners or give us an example or three adjectives that best describe you during this time and why.
During that time as a teenager, I would
And like
say
up until now, like from that time of being a teenager, kind of finding out like, okay, like I'm more focused, I know what I want to do, to where you are now, like three adjectives.
so I would say curious. I was always curious about everything. I had way too many questions that I would get teachers angry. The mosque, definitely the the sheikh at the mosque did
You
not like
was
me and my
Look, you was
questions.
causing some serious trouble over there, young
Oh,
man.
I was causing a lot of doubts in people's minds. They had to get rid of me. And so I would say curiosity has been ingrained in me since I could remember. Adventurous slash recklessness slash confidence. I think they all fall in the same spectrum, but depending on the context, you could use different words. So I always had that adventurous, like risk taking, let's do it. Right. And when it doesn't work out, let's do it again. And so that finalized itself in me right now as this perseverant person that I am. I just kept trying, kept trying. I failed, whatever. Try the next thing. And as you
True.
grow, when you have that mentality, you fail less and less. And you start to also realize that the people who are really financially successful or career successful, they had to take risks. You don't really get there playing it safe. And if you do, it's going to take a long time because you're basically waiting for other people to slip up,
That's
right?
true. That's
Uh,
true.
so, so perseverant, curious, and because of the life, I felt like I lived so many lives. Like I've seen what it's like to have nothing, nothing. I've seen now, thankfully, I've done well. I'm working at a big tech company. Uh, I live in a major city, and I've gone through that entire spectrum in a span of like 15 years.
Hmm.
So I would say empathetic, empathy. I feel whoever I meet, even even if I meet somebody that wants to spit in my face because I'm a Middle Eastern descent, you know, I still have that empathy that I understand. Like I know what this person has been fed, what information they've seen, and what life they've lived, or at least not maybe I don't know, but I can only imagine what they have lived to feel that way about me. So I'm not
Not
saying
even
I would,
knowing you.
not even knowing me, and I wouldn't tolerate it, but I would understand it, and it helps me have conversations and really understand people of all shapes and sizes and walks of life.
Mhm, mhm. Now you talked about you just kind of give a little hint of the tech company, but I want to know a little bit more about this schooling for you. Like, what did you go to school for? Like, how did that schooling help you in your career?
So, like I said earlier, I barely passed my classes in high school. Like I was the last person anybody thought would go to university or end up where I am or end up what I studied. So when I was in high school, when I finished it, I was on top of the moon. I was like, "Oh, I made it. It's done. I never have to go to school again. Thank God." And then I just sat and, had a temporary part-time job at Shoppers Drug Mart, and I was at some point driving delivery for Domino's. And I remember it was like 5, 6 months after I had finished high school, and my friends were starting university, and they were just living a totally different life. Some of my friends were not doing that, and I could see the life we were living, and I could see the life that my other friends who were in university were heading.
Mm,
And I thought like, well, university college is not for me. So where do I go from here?
mm,
And I remember my dad walks into my room, and by the way, this is at this point, me and my brother were sharing a bedroom. So my dad walks in my room, my brother's at school because like he actually was a studious person. He went to university.
mm,
So you can imagine the comparison between me and him was also very like easy to make. And so here I am, the kid who just failure in so many ways. And then my brother who is the studious person who's getting it,
mhm,
My dad walks in, and I swear, Paul, this is the first time in my life that I could remember my dad asking me, "How am I doing? Like, how are you?"
mhm, mm.
And normally people ask you that like as a drive by, "Hey, how are you doing? See you later."
True.
But when I heard it from him, I was like, "Wait a minute. Like this is somebody who low EQ, just not an emotional person due to the culture and maybe just himself being that way, asking me, how am I?" And that's when it all kind of clicked in my head that something is wrong. Like something is not right for for my dad to be asking me this. And
Mhm,
so I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing fine." And he walks away. And I swear I sat there alone staring at the wall for like 4 hours, having one of those moments where you're just in your head thinking about life and imagining how life was heading for me if I continued on the path that I was, and
mm,
imagining how life could be if I took this path or that path or that path. And so I started to see for the first time that now, at this point in my life, I was 18 turning 19, that there was nobody coming to help me or push me in any direction. That's it. I was on my own now. There's no, you're forced to go to school, you're forced to do this, none of that. And that is what I needed in order to realize I can do whatever I want. I'm going to have trouble and challenges doing that, especially because I gave very little attention in high school. So my grades were horrible. But it was that realization that made me think, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to study? And
mm,
at that point in my life, all I could really think about was, well, I love video games. I love technology. I love how tech is such a scalable thing that can help millions or billions of people without needing millions or billions of people to be there, you know?
mhm, mhm,
Like one person can make something that can affect millions of people. That was a very exciting thought for me. It was this there was like this laziness in me that was thinking, well, how can I do the most with doing the least? And I felt like technology had that ability. And I, thought, well, I'm also, not that like sciences and math, terrible, got very bad grades. So what can I do with tech, but not actually build it?
Mhm.
And really, business was what came to mind. So I loved interacting with people. I loved talking to people. I was comfortable doing presentations and, acting, that I thought business might be a good avenue for me. And I signed up at my local community college because that was the only school that would basically accept my transcript from high school,
True.
right? And even then, I got such bad grades that they needed me to do an English assessment test to prove that I could speak English adequately enough. And like, this is what I'm telling you about. Like, I'm born and raised in Canada, and I just did not put in any sort of effort, and also was kind of, ESL in a way because I didn't learn it till I was 5. But long story short, I got accepted. I killed that test, got in, and for the first time in my life, I had this vision and this mission. I had a vision of what like 10, 20 years from now would look like, and I had a mission to achieve that. And it was the first time in my life I got straight A's. I was just breezing through school. And this was in college. So I was really stunned because I had always felt like, well, I'm barely passing everything in high school. Uh, and it was about 2 years in when I realized, well, why, with the grades I'm getting, why don't I shoot even higher? Let me see if I can transfer to the University of British Columbia, because they have a program there that allows me to do this dual major with the business school and computer science. And I was like, you might as well try, right? And this
Mhm.
is where that mentality of always try,
Adventurous,
yeah, adventurous, perseverant, and
curiosity that you were talking about earlier. Yeah.
yeah, so they accepted me. I got in. It was a grind, The computer science part was definitely like every day was me thinking, man, I wish I paid attention in this class. And so I was learning a lot of things that I should have known already. But I got through. And I think that a big part of that like grind is why today I am who I am.
Mhm. And that was like in the first 5 years after college. Like, how was that? How'd you find your footing?
Foot in where? Sorry.
Like, how'd you manage after like taking these courses? Like, how was
So
that?
I was, again, because no money, parents weren't helping. I was working a part-time job. I was getting student loans and grants from the government, and I was going to school doing full time, but not full time. Like, I think it was like 4 courses instead of 5, because I had to work and do all these other things. And
Multitasking.
and then eventually, I actually got a job at the college, which is Douglas College. Shout out to Douglas, amazing school.
Okay.
I got a job there as a tutor, helping the other students learn the classes I was just taking and did well in. And that taught me so many things. Like, to be that tutor coach is huge. You know, there's so many things that I look back on my life that when I did them, I did not see what they would be. I did not see the value that they would bring me. I just thought, this sounds good. Let me try it out. And now when I look at where I am and I'm like, wow, I really learned how to do this thing I'm doing today because I was tutoring for 5 years. And I launched my coaching business because I was tutoring. So
Mm,
all these
mm.
things like played a step, right?
Didn't
I
you
think
didn't you didn't even know it was gonna happen like that, but like,
not at all.
and that's just having faith and just following through. Like, it seems that in your journey, like you just kept on opening doors, and each door you opened up led to like bigger and better things, which led you to your career, and like all these things that just happen in within a year, 2 years, 3 years. Things happen, but you just gotta wait. You gotta have patience. And I feel like just hearing and listening to what you're saying, like especially when you talked about like not being a really good student, that really is discouraging at times, when you're in a school full of people, and everyone's getting good grades and you're like, everyone's picking a college, and you're like, I'm not picking a college. And then you don't go, and you're just thinking about like, oh wow, I'm not that good. I'm not that studious. Like, how could I then get a job, and work for like these larger companies? But then you said, got into the rapping and and the I think it was the acting thing. Now I want to know a little bit more. I know you gave me some adjectives. Now be back early in the interview, but I want to know like what's like one of your greatest qualities as you were doing all of this. Like, what is one of the greatest qualities that you have, and like how did you apply that to your career?
I would say currently I have a I have this brand of being insatiably curious, and I fully believe that is who I am. This curiosity in me, stemmed from I don't know where it came from. I just know it was there as a child, and a lot of people were trying to stamp it out because it wasn't conducive to the environment I was in when I was younger. But I kept it. I kept doing it. And I would say my curiosity is what has recently led to a lot of cool opportunities and cool things, because I approach most conversations I have with, what can I learn? Like, what can I understand from you? And I also have this belief of whatever I believe, I could be wrong. And that I feel is a huge part of the curiosity. Like, yes, I want to learn and I want to have conviction in the things that I believe, but I also realize things change, especially in marketing. Things seem to change like every month.
Hmm.
Uh, so I don't have this belief of what I know is certain forever. I know that the things I know, the things I'm doing are working in certain contexts, in certain situations that won't work in other places, won't work in other contexts. And so, there's this, I wish I could remember the quote, but it's essentially this story about the water bottle, right? How if you were to bottle water right from the lake, it might cost like 35 cents to buy it. But if you want to buy that same water in an airport, it's like $10, or in an
Hmm.
airplane, it's like $10. And I think what it really shows is that whoever you are, whatever your strengths are, you might not be valued in the place you are. But if you find the right place, if you find your airplane, you'll be very valued for those skills and for those characteristics. So
Hmm.
I think that as much as there is self-reflection on how can I be better or what can I do better, you got to self-reflect on what are you good at, not as a skill like, oh, I'm good at Photoshop. Like, what are you good at as a process, as a characteristic, as a trait that, and then when you think about that, then go, where is that needed? Where is
Hmm.
that necessary?
Hmm. And it's funny when you said the water bottle um, thing. It's one of our previous guests had talked about that as well too. Just
Okay.
finding that place where you are valued the most. You're 100% right. That water bottle, like you said, 35 cents here, but then you go to the airport, it's $10. That's a massive jump. Um, and it brings
And
me
think
to
about
my
that, Paul, if you think about that, if you scale that, the skills you might have right now as a person, people think, oh, what should I study that will get me a good job? But I'll tell you something, that right now I'm in a job where the things that I studied are not really applied. Like, I'm not using computer science in my job right now. I'm in marketing strategy. But the things that I learned in school, the things that I learned in life all play together in random conversations that I have with the people that I'm helping in my job.
Mhm.
A lot of the skills that I have, a lot of the things that I'm doing for people that I'm helping my clients with are things that I learned in the past year. It's not a, oh, the thing I study is what I have to use and that's all I need to know. No, if you stop learning after school, if you stop learning when you get a job, you're going you're going nowhere. You're going to stay stagnant, right?
Mm. You're very true about that. I mean, life in general. Like if you stop trying to grow, then you really are holding yourself back. You know, they always tell like individuals in their, the elderly, like you got to keep moving. I mean, I feel like, and no matter how young or old you are, you got to keep on wanting more information. I feel like your curiosity, that attribute that you have, like it helps you, in your journey. Now, being a leader in your field, right, and also being from the being Middle Eastern, have you ever felt that you've been looked down upon?
I honestly haven't seen that. I
Mm,
feel it might happen. It might happen without me noticing it, but I haven't. No, I haven't seen anybody make that apparent, or I haven't heard that through the grapevine. And I'm
mm,
sure it happens. Again, it's about the place you're in, the people you're around. Uh,
mm,
I've definitely had racist encounters in my life, especially at the airport, but luckily not yet in my like post college career.
mm. And for someone like yourself, like you obviously in the corporations and companies you have worked for, there's a lot of listeners that are looking and striving to be a part of like corporate America. What is some of the what would you say are some of like two pieces of advice you could give to some of the listeners, if they really want to pursue that big corporate lifestyle?
I know the appeal behind the big corporate lifestyle, right? Security, getting that value, being associated with that brand, working at someplace massive kind of makes people feel good about themselves and feel good to their parents and their friends. But I would say that you should really think hard about why are you doing that? Like, why do you really want to do that? Think about the two, three, four steps ahead, and not just the next step ahead. Most people will say, I just want a good job so I can make good money, so that
Mm,
maybe one day I can buy a house, right? And when they say that to themselves, all they picture is big corporate, but they don't see the immense amount of money you could make working at a startup and getting, that's a small team, but you have stock that might make you a millionaire in
mm, mm,
in like 7 years if they go public, or if they sell the business. They don't see the possibilities of, well, why don't I start my own business? Uh, and you could make a lot more money doing that than working corporate.
mm,
The
mm,
thing I like about the corporate world is it's obviously more secure in the short term. Like you have a lot more resources and processes that will help you see how things are done on a bigger scale. So it's important to learn those things, and that's kind of why I'm here. I'm in
mm.
the corporate space to learn how are things done in a mature place, and then I'm slowly kind of working my way smaller and smaller in terms of company size.
Mm. Now, how did you find your voice in corporate America?
Funny enough, I think it has to do with, okay, I can't give this advice blank, you know, you should just do this, because it depends on who you are and who the company is. I do know that I am a kind of person who I'm pretty creative. So when there's a problem, there's a constraint, I like to think, well, how can we do this regardless of the constraint we have? And I'll do things that end up sometimes not having a splash and just being whatever. And other times I'll do things where people are like, wow, I really appreciate that. You know, this is amazing. This is given the constraints you had. And really all I did was just not really give a shit and try to make a good situation out of something that wasn't. So I think that applies really in many places. If you can look at things uh, that are not ideal and make them ideal, or make a bad situation better, a lot of people are going to like you for that. And a lot of people are going to be thankful for that.
Mhm,
And in corporate America, there's a lot of things that are not ideal. You come in, you think, wow, this is a well oiled machine. They're making billions of dollars. wow, do they have problems of every variety. Now, if you go in there with this mentality of, I'm just going to do my job, I'm just going to do what's on paper, or I'm just going to do what my manager tells me or what the expectation is, you might do well, yes. But the minute you start looking at, well, how can I help these other things that are happening? How can I help outside of my role? How can I do something that people don't even recognize as a problem because everybody's so busy with their role, with their job, in addition to doing your job, right? That will go very far, not in corporate America, in life. You will go very far from what I have seen other people do and what I have seen happen to me in the past few years.
Now, being in corporate America, you've been there for a while. Like, could you tell the listeners maybe like a low point that you felt in your career, and how did you handle that and turn that around?
Out of university, I joined. I got an offer to work at one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, and it had like 600,000 employees. I didn't even know that when I was interviewing and got the offer. I knew they were big. And when I got there, I realized just how big that was. That is a massive amount. And even if you're at a place that's, I don't know, 50,000, 40,000, a lot of these big companies have those kind of numbers. You're going to see a lot of things that suck, right? You're going to see things that are boring. You might be doing things that are boring. So for me, when I really joined that world, it was a low point for me just to feel this tiny little insignificant piece in this massive company. Like nobody really cared. And it was evident nobody really cares about you because you're one of hundreds that they hire every season in your office, right? Not even in your state, your country, your whatever. There's many, many more people they are hiring, and you are just one of them. So you're not, I think going from this school in university, you have this mentality of you're going to do everything you can to be the best possible candidate to get hired at this massive company. And you're you're doing your best to feel and be special so that they would choose you. And then you get there and then you don't feel special because they don't treat you that way really, because you're also not that special. Like there are so many people who are equally smart or more, who work harder or the same. And so figuring out exactly what is it that I can do to make myself feel fulfilled, to make myself feel special in a sea of everybody's the same or the expectation is the same. And that's where I was going back to what did I do is really look at the when things are shitty, how can I make them better beyond what is expected of me? And you'd be surprised how few people do that. Most people are just clocking in and thinking, if I do what I'm told or if I do what's in my job description, I will go far. I'm not going to rock the boat. If anything, rocking the boat and not tolerating, being impatient when things are not going well and trying to fix them is what has propelled me forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I think that's a valid thing. Some people like you said, I'm gonna go to work and work 9 to 5. If those were the hours, nowadays it's not 9 to 5. But let's just say that, I'm gonna go to work, I'm gonna work 9 to 5, and hopefully I'll incline up that ladder. But having a voice does help you, get up that ladder, right? But then some people like afraid to kind of use it because they're like, well, if I use it, I might not move up the ladder. But it's like knowing when and how to do it. And I feel like you've done a phenomenal job in your career path. And I think that's something the listeners could take away from is just like knowing how to navigate that at the right time and at the right place. And just being knowledgeable of how to make those moves and those decisions and to incline you up that ladder. Now, I know that you work at LinkedIn, and I know the listeners are dying to know a little bit more about like what is you have a long title, you know. So like what does your role consist of at LinkedIn and what do you do?
So LinkedIn is a professional social media platform, as most people know it. But really, it has there's three LinkedIns for three different types of people. There's, I should say four. There's one, the LinkedIn that everybody uses to add their experience and CV and post content and thought leadership. Then there's the sales navigator portion, which allows salespeople to use a tool to search for potential customers. Then there's the recruiter side of it that allows people to find the right candidate for a job they're hiring. And then there's the marketing solution side. And within each of those, the recruiter, the sales, there's like subcategories like the learning and LinkedIn learning and stuff like falls under the talent umbrella. But on the marketing solution side, that is where people use LinkedIn to advertise their company. And primarily it's companies that are using LinkedIn for a B2B advertising. There are a lot of companies that are using LinkedIn for direct, business to consumer type products. Think like Nike or Adidas. But I would say a lot of them are companies that are selling a software to another company. And so what I do is I have at any one time, let's say 10 different companies that are in my book. And my job is to help them use LinkedIn, the marketing solution side, the advertising side, to get the best results for their company, to get the most sales, to get the most marketing leads that will translate into sales, to help them actually market their brand as a company so that they can hire the best talent. So a lot of my job is dealing with marketing strategy, talent, marketing, branding strategy. And I've taken a lot of my learnings from my previous job at Accenture, where I was helping people with design thinking workshops, where I would bring people in a room together virtually or in person and get them to all align on like one or three things that they need to do, or three problems, or align on a vision. So I've been like marrying this world that I had before with the world I have right now, to do that, to help these companies. And primarily the reason that I'm the tech lead is my 10 companies that I help are all technology companies.
And what are some of the clients that you work with? And you can tell the audience like how important LinkedIn is when it comes to like advertising for your business.
So I'm not actually sure if I can share the clients or what they're going through. So let me answer the second part of that. Mm-hmm. Something people don't realize, they think, LinkedIn has the kind of reputation based on what your feed is looking like. Some people will log in and they'll see a bunch of people posting things they don't like, and they'll just make a judgment on the whole platform, not realizing that they can tailor that. They can follow the right people. They can follow the people that are in their interests. They can follow the companies that are in their interest. I have heard time and time again of how people, individuals, not businesses, have used LinkedIn to get their dream job, to connect with the right person who then connected them to funding for their business, to find funding for their business, to find talent. Just so many amazing things happen on that platform that I have not heard of or seen on the other platforms that I use, the other social media platforms that are meant more for like sharing the highlights of your life, right? From a business perspective, people are on LinkedIn with that mentality of work, career, learning. If you're a business and you're not getting in front of people when they're in that mentality and you're not providing them that kind of value, then you could be completely forgotten or just not heard about, or you're going to grind really hard advertising on other platforms that don't have that mentality of their user base doesn't have that mentality. So they're not ready for whatever you're sharing. You might not even find the right people. The beautiful thing about LinkedIn is that you can actually, at least from the advertising side, actually, this is across all their products. You can find people based on what companies they work at, what job titles they have. Like say you're a student, right? And you're very interested in marketing strategy. You got to just type in marketing strategy and then the city you live in, and you're going to see the options to choose between people or companies or groups or whatever. You can find a group that somebody created, join it and learn from the people in their network. You can find somebody like myself and reach out to them and say, hey, I literally had 2 people do that this week. And I tend to say yes to more, like most people that will reach out to me, except when times are really busy. But people reach out to me, they say they want to learn about this career or they want to learn about how I went from like consulting to this. I will answer and I will help them. You're not going to find that happening on anywhere else. So from an individual perspective, it's very powerful. From a business perspective, it's necessary. Like you are going to get better results using that platform. The problem is most people don't know how to use that LinkedIn.
That is true.
So it ends up being very expensive because they're making a lot of mistakes that they don't need to make.
Now, do you do any coaching yourself to help people with understanding how to like, utilize that type of platform?
I do. Yes. Yeah. I've been helping really, it depends on who and what and why. I've been helping some companies in my free time. I've been helping coach individuals. So yeah, if there's anything I can do to help and you're listening, feel free to reach out and ask away.
And people can find you like on LinkedIn or something along those lines, right?
Very easily.
Okay. Now, something I wanted to kind of leave away with is like, I know that you're very passionate about storytelling and the language that we use, but like, why is that?
I wonder where this really started, but I think about how powerful storytelling is. Like if you look at any religion today, any major adopted religion, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and pretty much Judaism, anything, there are so many stories baked in to the religious texts. There's so many stories that are baked into how you should behave and how you should live your life and what you should and shouldn't do. And so I realize how powerful storytelling is. And what's interesting is that in marketing, in advertising, a lot of the best campaigns, the best marketing strategies know this and are rooted in this belief that you got to tell a story and it's got to be a powerful story that resonates with people. Not let's tell people how our shoe has 6 inches of rubber and that rubber is comfy for your feet and helps you run faster. You've never seen a Nike ad like that, right? The Nike ads are stories about people achieving what seemed like impossible. They just do it. And what's really interesting in the B2B world, a lot of companies don't have that mentality. Some of them have a constraint, right? You can't really tell that story about some products that are sold to some businesses, but I firmly believe that way more products than not, way more services than not can be told in a story format and resonate with way more people than they currently are being told. On a whole, though, I just feel that storytelling is fundamental to human nature. Like if you think about us having this conversation today, probably half of it, if not more, was stories. Right? And depending on what you believe, in the caveman days, we're around, not even caveman days, like 1,000, 2,000 years ago, we're just telling stories to each other around fires and whatever.
Yeah,
like that's the form of entertainment. That was it, right? And not just entertainment. Actually, there's a really interesting book about, I think it was by Noah Tuval, Sapiens, about the human progress from basically farmers when we discovered agriculture. And there's this section that talks about when did we learn how to write and read? And it was actually not that long ago that the average person could not write or read, right? The average person was just talking, communicating through talking. They weren't educated enough to write things down, to learn how to read those things. So most of human history up until this point, if you look at just backwards, the majority of time, the majority of people learned by telling stories to each other. And the fact that we don't give that the respect that it deserves is just mind-boggling to me.
Now I'm thinking back to when you mentioned about the whole caveman thing. I mean, even to this day, people are going back to like some of these like tombs and stuff. And if you think about it, like that was all those like hieroglyphics on the wall. That's a whole story right there.
Mm-hmm.
That people are like, to them at the time when they wrote it, it was just like, hey, this is just a way of us communicating, but, years later, people go into tombs and looking at stuff and be like, wow, like, so this is how it all started off. And, but I agree with you. It's, storytelling, the gift of storytelling is always a beautiful thing. And if you're able to do that, I think that's a great thing. And something I want to kind of, talk about a little bit, on another note was, I know you do a lot of coaching and, we talked about like how you help people out on LinkedIn, but I know you do a lot of coaching. I'm curious to know a little bit more about that side hustle that you do have that's outside of the LinkedIn, but it works with the LinkedIn. Where you like consulting, for presentations, evaluating team culture. Could you talk a little bit more about, those two areas?
So when I think about storytelling, my fascination and passion started with storytelling. And then as I dug deeper and learned more and more about this world, I realized that storytelling is one part of communication, but it is a very important part. It is one of the things that our brains have developed. You can actually remember things better when you hear them in a story format than if you heard them in a list or stats. So our brains are actually wired to just listen and ingest stories. And once I got deeper into that, I started expanding to, okay, where does this apply in the day to day? And I realized people, if you ask people what's your biggest fear, a lot of people will say public speaking. And they fear that more than heights, more than more than death sometimes. And I just thought about how I didn't really have that same fear. I did, growing up, and even sometimes now, I do feel those nervous jitters when I give a very high stakes presentation. But I've learned to love that feeling and learn to appreciate it for what it is. It really is your body telling you, hey, this is a high stakes moment. So what should I do here? And your body is not used to it, right? Your body is an ancient machine that responds with hormones and neurochemicals in ways that sometimes don't apply, right? Your body is responding in a fight or flight mode when you're giving a presentation, and that doesn't really apply these days. So I've come to really love everything about that, and I've helped a lot of people with their presentations. I currently do it quite regularly. It's one of the things that energizes me. I love helping people get better at presenting because I think it's one of those skills that can take you very far in life. Being able to communicate to a group of people is a lot more scalable than being able to communicate to one person, right?
True.
And the elevating team culture kind of started recently when I saw how in this remote/hybrid world we're in right now, culture has really taken a hit. And I think it's because, well, one, culture is hard enough to build and foster in an in-person environment, right? That takes effort and skill and energy. Doing it virtually is incredibly more difficult. And there are very few places that have been able to pull that off. And one of the things that I've picked up on is the places that have a very good understanding of each other, and they have a very good communication system. So I've started to help companies implement that in these group workshops. And some of the things that I've had the privilege of hearing, of seeing people go through have just been so amazing. The best way I would describe the elevating team culture is basically like, group therapy in a corporate setting, but not kumbaya, but really like tactical and effective that'll help the team work better with each other, communicate better with each other, and ultimately like going to work more and trust their colleagues more. And if you do all that, you're just going to get more out of your people.
And that's important if you want to incline the office, the environment, and uplifting everybody at the same time is important. Especially when it comes down to corporate America. Sometimes you have different groups elevating at different times, but from my experience of being in corporate America, the departments that did very well was when everyone got up together.
Yeah.
Everyone was like pushed together. It was a big emphasis on team, and knowing that everybody, I want to say everybody was important in that whole journey. Like we're all gonna go from point A to point B, and everyone is gonna be in the game from point A to point B. We're not gonna pass it on to the next person. We're not gonna drop on somebody's desk. We're all gonna go together. I think that's a very big thing. Like, what is your biggest advice you could give to like a young student who feels hopeless about having a career in tech?
Well, I just want you to remember that I, really it's cliche, but if I could do it, so can you. I had, well, first of all, I want to back that up and say a career in tech is not the end all be all. Don't think that is it. That's all you need. And that will be where you stop, and that will fulfill you forever. Because having come from extreme, suffering through school financially and just, not doing well and not having hope for a good career, to now having it, you would be surprised how quickly you adjust to a new way of life and you continue to look at, well, what's next? So there's this always going to be this element of how can you be fulfilled in where you are today while also having that drive to improve your situation. But if you just go heavy on let me obsess with improving my situation, 10, 15, 20 years can go by and you'll still be miserable. Now, I know very, very well that having a career in tech can change people's lives as it did mine. I would say, think about, when people think career in tech, they usually think software engineering, maybe product manager, maybe customer, whatever. There's so many jobs in the tech world. There's so many jobs that, I'm in sales right now. I'm technically in the sales function, right? And the skills that I picked up, I would say I learned more about what the job I'm doing right now. I learned more about when I was doing work at like Shoppers Drug Mart, dealing with customers. And when I was delivering pizza to so many people and just learning how to talk to people, learning how to connect with people in seconds. So try not to think about, oh, tech is so far away and this is hopeless. Think about, what am I doing today that is going to make me a better human being, a better person, or a more valuable person to somebody else, right? Because here's one thing I didn't really realize until a little later than I would hope. But when you're a student, you're in this mentality of, oh, please, company, hire me, please. I'll do whatever, And then it's because generally, as a student, you don't really have a lot to bring other than that drive of, I'm willing to do whatever, right? I'm willing to work and I'm willing to learn. Just give me a chance. But people forget that you can get a valuable skill while you're a student. You can learn a valuable skill so that when you get to that point and you're knocking on doors, you don't have to go begging for a job. You can go in with, hey, listen, I know you are looking at me like I'm a product. Like the company looks at you, an employee, this almost the same way that they look at a piece of machinery, right? They're investing in that machine so that it can make them more money. They're investing in you so that you can make them more money. So if you go in with, if you invest in me, here's how much I'm going to give you, it's more of a conversation. And it's more of a, I know that I'm not exactly what you're looking for, but here's how I can help you. Right? I have these skills that, given the scale of what you're working on, maybe my skills plus your scale equals you company make $1 million a year from my services. So pay me 150, 200, whatever, 100K, and I'm good. And this is how a business operates. This is why businesses make billions of dollars. Like when you see Apple made billion, Amazon made billion, it's because the employees that they're hiring are making millions more than they're costing the company. Right? So think about that mentality and think about, well, if I was a business owner or a manager, what would I pay myself to work, for them? And if you got no skills or you got nothing to offer, then I'm sorry. Like it would make no sense to hire you. So really think about, what are you bringing to the table? And if you feel like you don't have a lot to bring to the table, well, that's the beauty of learning. Go and learn something. Go, because one thing, I know that we're getting on a tangent here, but one thing
you saying some stuff, man. You hitting some deep gems right here.
Yeah.
Providing value is important anywhere you go. If just like you said, everybody out of college, hey, look, hire me. I'm one of the hardest working individuals. Okay, cool. All right, but what else could you do?
And here's the one thing that I think students don't realize. I talk to a lot of students and I mentor them, coach them with the presentation stuff. They don't realize, and I didn't realize this either. So I'm not saying, we all tend to have this lack of foresight when it comes to how much time you have as a student is like unbelievable compared to how much time you will have as you age. When you hit your late 20s, you're probably working full time at that point, and you probably have a partner. Maybe you have a kid, maybe you have a dog, whatever it is. You might have 2 hours at the end of the day where you have enough energy to do something other than cook, clean, whatever, right? When you're a parent, you might have 30 minutes. You might have an hour. When you're a student, you have like 5, 6, 7 hours every day that you can be using to level yourself up. So if you think about that from a mathematical perspective, if you have, let's say, 5 hours a day, and I, a professional working full-time and have all these other things going on, I have 1 hour a day, I have to work 5 days straight in order to get the equivalent time you have in one day. But it actually doesn't equal out each other like that, because 5 hours of focused energy, to me, goes a lot further than 5 individual 1 hour sessions. Right? I get a lot more done, and I learn a lot more when I got like a 5 hour block to just go deep.
Just knock things out.
Right?
But that's how you from the beginning of your journey, and when you were talking about like just growing up, like that's just you just being focused. And I feel like, you as a young adult, just coming up in the game, trying to find their footing, especially when it comes to corporate America or just in general, like school, like you have to have those time frames and block things off. Like, all right, I'm a focus, because you said 5 hours. I always tell people, when you mention it, focus energy is the best energy. When you're that focused, things will happen. And Moody, I just want to say, a lot of the things you dropped tonight on this interview are definitely very valuable. That any one of the listeners listening, whether they're looking to be in tech or not, knowing about how you started off in Vancouver, with like the cultural difference, and then how you weren't that really good in school, but you found a way to make it work for you to advance into corporate America, working for various different companies, to now coaching people. And, I think that's very admirable about you. I think that's something that any of the listeners could walk away from and just say that, you're definitely dedicated at what you do. And you're passionate, and you definitely found what you're good at. When you're in school, you were like, oh, I don't even know what I'm gonna do. But now you found your home, you found your niche. And I just
And I
want to
want to
say,
clarify, Paul.
go ahead.
I have found it for now.
Ah,
One of the things that I feel a lot of people they forget to say when they talk about find your passion or find, what you want to do, is they have all this pressure on it for, like, you got to find what you want to do for the rest of your life. We don't live in that world anymore. Like, maybe if you think, oh, I want to be a doctor, okay, you got to spend 10 years studying in some places to do that. So you better know that that's what you want to do. But in corporate America, I bounced, like, if you look at my resume, I went
yeah, I
from
saw it. Yeah,
product management to consulting to sales to marketing sales. It's, you don't have to find what is that one job I want to do forever? That doesn't exist
true, true.
for
Well,
me. It doesn't exist for me. And I don't think it exists for most people. I
mm,
think you
mm,
need to think about, what do I want to do in general? Like, what kind of things interest me, and see, okay, these four things, maybe I'll choose this one first to start. You try it out, you like it, eventually you stop liking it, you move on, you
yeah,
grow, you change.
100%. Moody, man, thank you, man. Thank you for this. And that last part you said was crucial for now. I like that. That's the one. But yeah, no, Moody, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And it's dropping a lot of gems with our listeners. I greatly appreciate you just opening up, being vulnerable, and just utilizing this platform for what it's really worth.
Paul, thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure to talk about these things, and hopefully, even if one person hears this and really thinks deeply about their life and changes their path or goes on to do good things, that's amazing for me to hear. So anybody who's
Mm,
listening to this, reach out. I'm happy to talk. Um, I'm happy to chat, and I'm happy to help in which ways I can that are sustainable, because I only have so
mm,
much time and energy. But, give it a shot. You got, the worst thing that happens is I don't respond, and that's
mm,
not that big of a deal.
mm. Well, I want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Moody, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect, and follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcasts.